The sugar tong splint is used to immobilize fractures of the distal radius. Examples of such fractures include the commonly encountered Colles fracture, radial styloid or chauffeur's fracture, or comminuted intra-articular distal radius fracture. The sugar tong splint, unlike the simple volar short arm splint, prevents supination and pronation of the forearm, as well as flexion and extension of the wrist. This is desirable for displaced fractures of the distal radius, especially those that require closed reduction. Place the patient in either the sitting or supine position, with the elbow flexed to 90 degrees. Use a piece of 3 or 4 inch webril to measure the required length of the splint. Begin at the dorsal metacarpal heads and proceed proximally along the dorsal aspect of the forearm, around the elbow, distally along the volar forearm, up to the distal palmar crease. Lay this piece of webril on a bedside table, and then roll out an additional 3 layers to form the cast padding. Use 2 pieces of webril to make the top layer, each offset from the previous layers by 50%. Next, roll out 8 to 10 layers of 3 or 4 inch plaster on top of the webril. The plaster may be folded back and forth upon itself during this process. Several rolls of plaster may be required for the sugar tong splint. Soak the plaster in room temperature water until fully saturated. Raise the plaster from the bucket and remove the excess water by allowing the layers to gently fold down on themselves and then gently squeezing them. Lay the plaster down onto the cast padding and smooth it with the palms of your hands. Fold the overhanging edges of the top layer of webril over the plaster to form a single outer layer that will prevent the plaster from sticking to the elastic bandage. Apply the splint along the same course that was used during measuring, from the volar distal palmar crease around the elbow and up to the dorsal metacarpals. Use the palms of your hands to gently mold the plaster to the forearm. An assistant, or the patient, if he is able, may be required to hold the splint in place as the elastic bandages are being readied. Use 4-inch elastic bandage to secure the splint to the arm. Begin wrapping distally and progress up the arm, overlapping the elastic by 50% on each wrap. Use a moderate amount of tension during application. Once the elastic bandage is in place, again mold the splint to the arm with the palms of your hands, taking care to avoid creating indentations or wrinkles in the plaster, which may cause pressure sores. Recheck the distal neurovascular function of the arm once you are finished. This should include capillary refill, as well as sensory and motor function. Apply a standard shoulder sling once you are finished with the splint. A sling provides for patient comfort and keeps the arm elevated.